One of the biggest topics of discussion in the past decade has been this idea of superhero fatigue. And I mean, it makes sense. Superheroes have always been a part of the cultural zeitgeist, at least for as long as I can remember. I mean, honestly, for as long as I've been alive and way before that, because superheroes have been in comics, TV shows, and movies way before I was even alive. But during the 2010s, we saw the rise of the powerhouse that was the MCU come into full effect, right? It felt as though at that time, nothing that Marvel did, they could miss on, even if the quality varied at times. But one thing was for certain, that pre-Endgame, Marvel, they were on top, like they had it. And it was such guaranteed bank every single time that other companies tried to get in on the interconnected universe idea. Namely DC, but there were a few. There was that one Tom Cruise Mummy universe. I think Power Rangers tried to do it, and there's a few more that I'm missing. But DC came with what I would describe as the hastily thrown together DCEU, which we will discuss, but that's not the main topic of this video because I've discussed it too much in my personal life to care to discuss it on here. And I mean, people on here have torn it apart better than I ever could, right? But throughout this video, I want to combat the idea of superhero fatigue. And by the end of it, I hope to convince you that it was never really a thing, right? But before you grab whatever you're eating, you sit down, you got your food. I know, I do it too. I am currently trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So, if you enjoyed the video and you want more weekly content, more great weekly content, right? Please consider subscribing, leaving a like, and commenting on what you guys think I could do better in these videos. I'm always trying to improve, trying to always get better with it. But with that out the way, I will also say that this video is going to look a little bit different than how I usually do it because I usually just do like character analyses so far. So bear with me and let's see how it goes. But let's get into the main course of this video. So in the 2010s, we saw what I would describe as the superhero boom, right? I mean, Marvel was hot. Anything that they put to screen would sell. I mean, look at Thor, The Dark World. I'm sorry, that one's kind of low-hanging fruit. But seriously, after the success that was the Avengers movie, pulling in $1.5 billion globally, which is crazy considering the Avengers were essentially always like the B team of Marvel. And before you get into the comments to attack me on this, before the MCU, like 10 people actually cared about the Avengers. Realistically, we all know that Disney had access to the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and especially Spider-Man, right? They would have seen those would have been the franchise headliners before the Avengers. But back on topic. After this, we saw one of the craziest runs imaginable from a studio. I need you to understand that between 2012 to 2019, the lowest grossing MCU film was Ant-Man. Ant-Man with $500,000 on a $130 million budget. That's a profit. That's a pretty good profit. Now, if the Avengers were a no-name team, imagine Ant-Man, and they could literally pull any obscure character they wanted. Not saying, Ant-Man's super obscure, right? To the 5 Ant-Man fans out there, sorry. But at this point in time, they could make a dupe movie. Dupe. The kind of alien mutant thing, and it probably would have turned a profit if we're being honest. But jokes aside, the point is Marvel had it and everyone else started to notice, even Tom Cruise and Universal Studios, who wanted to start something called the Dark Universe, and the Power Rangers. They even tried to do a Stephen King universe, right? Remember in the intro when I said there was others? Those are the others, which is kind of crazy. But I think the idea of superhero fatigue really originated not with Marvel themselves, but our good old friends over at Warner Brothers with DC. Now, I know I said this earlier that I wasn't going to tear into the DCU, but we can't talk about superhero fatigue without addressing what I call the bad movies. Now, Warner Bros. Saw the success of what Marvel was doing and said, hey, our characters are big, they're bigger. We have Superman, we have Batman. Let's do something with it. Like, why can't we do that? And thus, they try to launch their own universe with the infamous Man of Steel, which I don't think is a bad movie per se. Like, I don't think it's a bad movie. I just think it's a bad Superman movie, if I'm being honest with you. So they had Zack Snyder draw them up a plan, which was supposed to be like a 5-part epic, I'm pretty sure, you know, from the leaks of what we've gotten, but was forced to fast track to a Justice League movie by the company. And this meant that we went from a Superman movie to a Batman v Superman movie that was just throwing in characters because Warner Bros. Was like, yo, let's get to the DC. Let's get to the DC. Let's get to the Justice League. And this was about them trying to kill each other. So, whatever. And they were also trying to out-aura farm each other for some reason, every single chance they got, which, I'm not gonna lie, Ben Affleck's Batman, he had some aura. But this is where I think the idea of superhero inflation really started to occur, right? With Man of Steel, I can at least say it was a good movie. And I mean, it was like in the early parts, right? But Batman v Superman just felt weird. And I'm not talking about the Ultimate version because I haven't watched it and I'm not gonna watch it, okay? I'm not watching that. But it still made money, so we can move on to where superhero inflation is what I'm gonna call it, right? Really started to show its head. As we've been discussing, the Justice League. This movie was a critical and commercial flop in every single way possible, right? Warner Brothers had kicked Zack Snyder out, even though he was the one with the plan, and honestly, him not doing it at the time, he had very valid personal reasons to step back. If you look into it, I'm not going to discuss it here, but they brought in the man who did the first Avengers movie, Joss Whedon, who is now, I would describe as infamous. But, you know, we're going to keep this simple. The movie was horrible, and it was the first time since 2010, I think, that there was a superhero movie that was not considered profitable, and that was, you know, the Hulk. But by this point, people were starting to become more selective about what Kate movies they wanted to go and watch. And the biggest thing for them was quality. It wasn't enough anymore to just throw somebody into a suit and let them do cool stuff. People wanted to feel like they invested their time wisely. But this would be it for the DCU, in my opinion, because they had lost the audience's trust, which started to perpetuate this idea of superhero fatigue. But, you know, superhero inflation, that's what it really is. And, you know, they had lost the audience trust, but over Marvel, they were still going strong up until Avengers Endgame. But they themselves severely overestimated just how much they could get away with. Different day, wardrobe change, you know, I gotta take the arms out. I got tired last night, but let's get to the 2020s. So the beginning of the 2020s was a crazy time for everybody, for the entire world. You know, COVID was finally being taken seriously as a global pandemic, and this led to the entire world being shut down, which also meant that movie theaters were also being shut down. But this didn't stop Disney from releasing MCU projects. First, we have Black Widow, which released on Disney Plus. And honestly, between the misogyny and the fact that it was released like, what, 5 years too late, because it takes place directly after Civil War, and just the way it was thrown out, it wasn't exactly a success, but it did do well by COVID standards. And this is where Disney saw a new way of releasing projects, right? Straight to streaming. MCU projects used to feel like an event. I remember in high school, everyone being hyped to see an MCU movie on opening night. And honestly, the last time that happened, I had that feeling was genuinely with Endgame, right? And I'm not saying that there haven't been good MCU movies since, but it's just, I haven't felt as compelled as I used to, right? So with the release of TV shows on Disney Plus, it really began hurting the branding because it seemed like they just began throwing things out there, just throwing things at the wall. And the fact that majority of them, except for Loki, if you haven't watched Loki, please watch Loki. I loved Loki. But they couldn't hold up to what we had expected from many other TV shows at the time, right? The quality just really wasn't there, and that didn't help them. And in fact, this did nothing but further push this idea of superhero fatigue. And this isn't to say that we didn't get some good movies in between, like Shang-Chi. I like Shang-Chi, and Eternals. Yes, Eternals. I will never forgive you guys for letting Eternals flop. I loved Eternals. But for every good movie, you get an even worse movie, especially for well-known characters like Thor, right? A character that had been well established in the MCU that people loved. People loved Chris Hemsworth. And we got Thor, Love and Thunder after Ragnarok, right? And it also didn't help that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness didn't exactly live up to the multiverse title. It was just kind of aside of multiverse, but all this to say, the main problem was that both the industry titans for superheroes had already lost the trust of audiences, and due to fast tracking and dropping lackluster movies, they began to lose audience trusts even more because they had increased release volume but suffered severely in quality. And as I've stated before, superheroes have always been a part of the cultural zeitgeist, whether it be games, comics, cartoons, or movies, but never before had the idea of questioning where Batman or Superman belonged in the world been asked. Why? Because literally everyone loves Batman and Superman. There's a superhero out there for everyone, right? There had always been and always will be a place for superheroes in the world. Literally everyone loves a story about heroes. The problem comes in when you think your audience will eat up whatever slop you're throwing at them. Regardless of if someone is loyal to or loves something, they still want that thing to have quality. And companies began to see this, so Marvel, of course, slowed down its release schedule, and Warner Bros. Got James Gunn to come in to head DC Studios. And looking at the superhero projects we have gotten in the recent years, they have finally began getting that message again, right? A Superman movie finally had good reviews again and understood the message of the character, right? And Thunderbolts, which was one of the most expected movies for me. Like, I heard them announce a Thunderbolts movie and I was like, nobody cares about that. You're not even gonna follow what the Thunderbolts actually is. But I went to watch that movie and it had me tearing up at the message because it tackled subjects that I actually cared about. Hell, I don't think 3-hour movies need to be a thing, but I loved The Batman and Dune. Dune's not a superhero movie, I just wanna mention Dune. And, you know, if you have something interesting to say with these characters, people will care. Just because you're making a superhero movie doesn't mean that you need to bank on the name of the character alone. But now I'll get to my closing arguments, and I don't believe, as I've said before, superhero fatigue was ever a thing. It was just an inflation of bad superhero movies. People will never get tired of Superman saving a cat or Batman saving Gotham if you have something to say with it. Give your audience a reason to watch your projects. I mean, honestly, they're treating them like products, so that really wasn't a misspeak. But treat them as though they are intelligent people, right? I love superhero media. It has been a large part of my life ever since I can remember. And it's informed a large part of my own personality. So no, people will never get tired of heroes. People will never get tired of heroes. But that's the video. Thank you. If you made it all the way to the end, I want to say thank you guys again for the support in the first 3 videos. I'm not where I want to be with this channel yet, but you guys are genuinely helping me one video at a time to make my dream come true. Like, it's crazy to me that my videos, all of my videos have at least 100 views on them and they have pretty good watch times. So thank you so much, genuinely from the bottom of my heart. You guys are genuinely helping me make a dream come true. So if you enjoyed the video, again, please consider leaving a sub, a like, and as always, leave a comment on what you guys think I could do better. And I love you guys. I'll see you guys next week in the next one. Bye.
Piece of shit alien! That is where you've always been wrong about me, Lex. I'm as human as anyone. I love, I get scared. I wake up every morning and despite not knowing what to do, I put one foot in front of the other and I try to make the best choices I can. I screw up all the time, but that is being human. And that's my greatest strength. And someday, I hope, for the sake of the world, you understand that it's yours too.